Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr and also with Kevin Noon. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's the night that we as Americans have been waiting 18, 24 months for. It's the buildup all year has been insufferable, let's be honest. But today it's finally here. The release of the first college football playoff rankings of the 12-team playoff era. Tony, it's decision 2024. What will the committee do?
We will find out. Kevin, if you are being ranked, stay in line. They must rank you. How's it going?
It's going well. The selection committee is in the state of Texas, so I'm assuming that they will rank red teams ahead of blue teams. So that's got to bode well for Ohio State and Georgia. Oregon, I don't know. The Green Party never really does all that well.
They're just stealing rankings away from other programs. You hate to see it. So welcome all. We are here. We will watch along with you with the release of the college football playoff rankings, the initial rankings, of which do you all remember who was number one in last year's initial rankings?
Mississippi State was in 2014. I thought that was what you were going to ask, and I was extremely prepared to answer that. Last year, was it Ohio State?
I'm going to say Alabama just because it's Alabama.
Indeed, it was Ohio State.
Oh.
The AP number one Michigan Wolverines were ranked 3 in the initial rankings, the initial college football playoff poll, because they had played nobody to that point. They had played a schedule very similar to Indiana's this year with very similar results. I do not expect, Tom, to see Indiana ranked number 3 in these initial rankings.
No, I don't think so. I think you'll see Indiana in the top 10 probably, but
better.
I don't think they'll be anywhere close to 3. Do we want to just pop up the brackets? We've talked about this a million times, but it might not be bad to have a kind of refresher. We have our blank rankings ready to go. Just to give people I've just sort of a refresher on how this is going to work. We'll have the whole committee's top 25 there on the left. We got the first 4 out on the right, just so we're kind of keeping an eye on who's next. And then the first round of the playoff is teams 5 through 12. Now, you could be ranked number 3. If Ohio State is ranked number 3, as they are in the AP poll, they could be number 5 in the CFP rankings because the top 4 spots are all reserved for the 4 major conference. For the top 4, I should say, the top 4 conference champions in terms of the committee ranking. So theoretically, if Boise State's ahead of, say, BYU, then Boise State could be the number 4, but more than likely Boise State will be the number 11 or number 12 team, something like that.
Yeah, and what the committee...
And that will dictate where they are. If they're 11, then they wouldn't be 12 in the 12-team playoff. They would be 11, and that's something that, I don't know, I can't speak for Tom or Tony, but that I learned when we had the conference call with the CFP committee and just maybe got a little bit of, either a refresher on some data that we knew or maybe some new information. There certainly were some things I didn't know. And, I hate to admit that because I like to think I'm the smartest person in the room, but I'm in the house by myself. I'm in the house by myself. So, I mean, it's a party of one.
It was one of the less successful Fox 90s sitcoms, Party of One.
Yes. I know some people have asked this. The committee is only ranking the top 25 teams. They're not doing any brackets. That's something we're going to do. Other people will be doing. But the committee is only ranking the top 25 teams just as they always do. And then we will plug those in and look at the matchups and think all of the great thoughts as we watch this unfold and how long we've been waiting for something like this and get a first real image. This is like the Hubble images. In a few weeks, we'll get like the James Webb images where it's like, well, this is much clearer, a much clearer picture. So as we watch, go ahead and throw in your comments and we'll get to those and super chats and what have you, and we'll talk about it.
Odysseus asking a question that I think is very valid as we have 5 minutes before the telecast starts and then probably 5 minutes of foolishness before we see any rankings. Who here, Tom, Tony, or Kevin, would be the best as a committee member?
I think Tom, he doesn't have enough to do. So I think
Yeah.
he's got time for this.
Mhm.
He loves being involved in minutia, and there's
Mhm.
no more important minutia than this. So I would volunteer Tom, and then watch as his head explodes at the thought of when it you're
I
gonna
would
drop the
volunteer
kid off.
myself because I love 4 hotel nights in Grapevine every week, and I need to get my Marriott nights because I'm falling behind.
You know,
Yeah,
one,
two people who don't need I don't need anything else to do, and Kevin doesn't need any more Marriott points. So I guess the answer is Tony, just by sort of process of elimination. I don't know.
it's one of the cool benefits of this is that every committee member gets an iPad with like all of the important games broken down into 45-minute files. It's like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I can just click on this and watch whatever I want and watch it all day long.
Yeah, I would go for that. If they make that available for college football media, I would absolutely take that. That would
They
be that
should.
would save me a lot of time and allow me to be a more informed Lombardi Award voter, etc.
You know what? I'm thinking, since there probably won't be an Ohio State related question for me to ask tonight, I might just go ahead and drop in on that teleconference. And again, I'll be leaving at like 7:30 or so to jump on the teleconference and then come back and tell you what they said. I might instead just be like, hey, is there any thought to freeing up some of those, letting the media in on those as well? On that way we can have all of those games. I think that would be pretty cool. And why not? We're trying to cover the sport, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, listen, I don't want to use the word hero, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Hero.
what other word to use. So
Heroic.
here's a relevant one from Rusty Jesse. Does it matter where we're seated tonight? If we win out, be either 1 or 5, lose number 2 along the way, and it could get interesting.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. It'll just be interesting. In terms of, I think Georgia is will Ohio State be ahead of Georgia? Will Georgia be 2? Will Ohio State be 3? That's what I'm expecting, given Georgia's 2 good wins in terms of Clemson and Texas, and Ohio State really having only 1 good win. So I think Georgia has the argument there. Georgia has a close win over Kentucky and Florida. Ohio State has a close win over Nebraska, but I think the committee will still side with Georgia there. And if Ohio State wins out, they're going to be 1 or 2, as we know. And then the interesting thing is the number 3 team will be that number 5 seed, and that's going to come from the Big Ten or the SEC. And probably at this point, it's hard to imagine it coming from anywhere other than the Big Ten, unless it would happen to be Georgia. But even then, Georgia would have 2 losses. So I don't know if they would necessarily. I mean, Ohio State would have 2 losses too if they end up at 5. But that 5 spot, as we keep talking about, is a pretty plumb spot unless you're dealing with Army.
Yeah, Boise State as a 12 seed is one thing, and Austin Genty is a fantastic running back, and you're going to give up 150 yards, and you're going to feel like your defense is terrible, but you're going to win the game. The way Army plays, even if you win, you're going to hate every moment of it. That's just sort of how a lot of those games against service academy teams go, like really talented service academy teams. Both Army and Navy have pretty decent quarterbacks this year, which is generally the years when Army and Navy have pretty good teams. Navy got thumped by Notre Dame, but has been really good. Other than that, Army's undefeated right now. They're going to be in the rankings. I don't know. They're probably not going to be close to, they're what, 18th, I think, in the AP poll. I think they're probably somewhere in that. I would not be surprised if they were 20th to 23rd in the committee rankings, just because the committee, I think, is going to do its very best to make sure they don't have 2 non-power teams in the top 12. But it's that is a team that you don't necessarily want to face. But on the whole, I mean, this is something we're going to end up talking about a bunch. But yeah, that number 5 spot, if you get a number 12 and it's whoever, Boise State or Army or whoever, and then your second round game is against like a Big 12 champion, Iowa State or BYU or someone like that, that is not a bad path to the semifinals. So, there's going to be a lot of conversation about the value of the bye versus not having to play a really top team. And I'm sure that's something that's going to get litigated a bunch between now and Selection Sunday. And then even after that, we see this in baseball all the time. You get a week off, and sometimes you're rusty, and it's not a benefit to you.
No, and that's going to be interesting. Yeah, just over the years as we watch this to see how detrimental that bye week is. That bye is for teams, and I still think it's going to be like basketball. It comes down to matchups, and I don't think anybody wants to play Army, but there's more talent on the Boise State side of things.
Mm-hmm.
The Army thing, you just have to worry about. It's a completely different game plan that you'd have to put together, and then just throw that one away and deal with something else. But you also have to worry about getting your defensive lineman cut and ankles and knees as we see the broadcast starting. I'm
looking at a map with all these states highlighted, and I'm like, what are they doing? Which states are they highlighting? This is the random mishmash of states. Oh, it's the Big Ten. Okay, yeah, it's still not used to
a random mishmash of states.
Yeah, they should change the name to that.
Well,
there's something up there they're showing right now. Indiana and Notre Dame together. We talked about that a little bit this week, Tony. How the funniest possible outcome is Notre Dame having to go to Bloomington for a first-round game and then losing their college football playoff debut to the in-state Indiana Hoosiers. I think that is the funniest possible way that this playoff could go.
I don't think I've ever seen the outline of the state of Indiana with the Notre Dame logo on it. It just looks wrong. But I would love to see Notre Dame at Indiana in the first round. That would be just imagine Kurt Signetti that week of, because when he got the job, he said Purdue sucks. He said Ohio State sucks. He said Michigan sucks. He forgot to say anything about Notre Dame. So he'll have plenty of time to just go all in on Notre Dame if they were to get that matchup. And Tom, you and I talked about this, I think earlier today. We have not watched Notre Dame in a while, so I don't know what they've become, what they're looking like. I know they're 7-1. They've started to play better, but I don't know that that's a matchup that anybody would necessarily fear in the playoffs either.
I mean, I would love to watch Notre Dame again and see what they're working with. Because I watched the last game I watched them play in any extended period was the Northern Illinois game. And after that game, I kind of dusted my hands and said, well, won't need to watch them again this year. And now they've sort of played themselves back into, well, might need to watch them again this year. But I don't think Notre Dame has solved the issue that Notre Dame has had for literally 30 years, which is the skill talent really isn't there. They don't have the fast twitch guys outside that you really need to match up with the Ohio States or Georgias or Alabamas or whoever, which is why those games always kind of look exactly the same when they play them.
Now, I'll just say this. We're all watching it via 3 different stream satellites. Tom is way ahead of me. I'm like a minute behind everybody. So
Boise State #1. What?
So I'm going to ask Tom and Kevin, no spoilers. Just wait for my reaction before you start talking about what's on the screen. Okay. So let's go at my speed, which
you don't have Boo Corrigan to kick around anymore.
Hey, Bill Hancock just took a nice satisfying sip of tea out of a mug in the committee room. So hopefully that doesn't spoil anything for you, but maybe.
Oh, those damn Marriott nights that are slipping through my fingers.
And Michigan AD Ward Manuel is the committee chair this year, so that's who we'll be talking with on the teleconference. Kevin, let me ask you, if Indiana had wings on their helmets, would they be in the top 4 right now in the AP poll?
I do think that there is something about the name on the front of the jersey for all of that. And even though Indiana hasn't played anybody, that didn't stop Michigan from not playing anybody last year. And as you said, they were 3 in the first one. So, I think that it would be tough, though. I mean, it would be tough because Oregon, Ohio State, I don't think 3 or 4 teams are going to be from the Big Ten, especially when you have Georgia, when you have Texas, when you have Miami out of the ACC. Nobody's talking about the Big 12. Rightfully so. That's kind of, I think that they would probably be in the top 5 potentially, but I think we're going to see Indiana at 8. That's kind of where I've penciled them in.
I'm going to be interested to see this whole group of 5 thing, because we just talked about Boise State and Army. if it's not one of those two, and there's no guarantee it is, you've got to go down the list. I mean, you're talking like a Tulane, a Memphis, programs like that have 2 losses. You might have a 2 or 3 loss group of 5 champion that you're looking at if Army loses to Notre Dame, and then so they go to the AAC championship game, and then they would play Notre Dame. So there's a little interesting, switch there in terms of how that goes. But it won't necessarily, doesn't have to be Army or Boise State, but it almost, I think everybody would like it for them. The committee would like it to be one of those 2 teams because they're already in the rankings. And if we know that if it's not a team that is ranked, they will then just rank the conference champions, and whoever is the 5th highest conference champion, whether they're 22 or 32 or whatever, it's just they're going to rank the conference champions if they're not already in the top 25. And I'm sure everybody's hoping that they do end up with somebody that is ranked as the 5th champion.
I'm sure they're hoping that, but yeah, just the important point there is it has to be a conference champion. So if Boise State is 13th or even 12th in the rankings and they lose to whoever in the Mountain West championship game, UNLV, then they're functionally out. Unless Boise State is somehow 4th and has the ability to slide a few spots after a Mountain West Conference championship game, it has to be a conference champion to get that 12 seed or that 5th conference champion slot. So if Army loses the AAC championship game and Boise loses the Mountain West championship game, someone else from the group of 5 is getting in. So we'll see. You said earlier that Army plays Notre Dame the week after the AAC championship game. They play Navy the week after.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just to clarify that the Army Navy game happens the week after the AAC championship game, which is something that everyone, when they made this decision a year ago, said, well, that's fine. It's not like it's going to impact the college football playoff. And then here we are. It might impact the college football playoff.
But it is not a league game. It is not.
It's so weird. Yeah. It is the most traditional game in maybe the entire sport. And it is just in this incredibly weird, bizarre, like nebulous gray area this year. So I'm being promised the exclusive reveal of the first CFP rankings is moments away, but that feels like, it's election night, Tony. There are a lot of lies flying around. It feels like that might be one of them. All right, let's see. We might be number 25, Army.
Ooh,
that's a big oof.
Yeah, that's low. They haven't played anybody yet, so they can move up with a win over Notre Dame. But man, Army is 18 in the AP.
Number 24, Missouri. Speaking of teams that haven't played anyone.
Boo.
And also have gotten murdered twice.
Murdered twice and had another game that it pulled out of its what.
Yeah, that was Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, very easily, Vanderbilt could have won all 3 of their games. Vanderbilt is not that far from being undefeated, which is
crazy.
Wild.
Scary.
Number 23, the Clemson Tigers.
Well, that's a good win for Georgia. That's a ranked win for the Georgia Bulldogs.
We always look forward to the real fun narrative inconsistencies. What you're going to see, you're going to hear a bunch about Georgia's quality win over Clemson week 1. Number 22 is Louisville. You're going to hear a bunch about Georgia's quality win over Clemson week 1, and you're also going to hear about LSU's loss to USC and how it doesn't really matter, and it isn't the measuring stick between the Big Ten and the SEC because it was just week 1, and you can't use week 1 for any kind of a measuring stick.
No.
Number 21, oh man. Number 21, the Washington State Cougars.
Well, and the thing
you know what? I am going to just raise my hand and say I am in the bag for Wazoo somehow getting in. That would be awesome.
And it'd have to be an at-large. There is no their champion. They have no championship game, conference championship game, so they would need to be an at-large, which is going to be almost impossible for them. Even at 11-1, I don't know that they can get in without ton of help. I'm talking
without portfolio. Colorado 20.
Colorado, number 20.
Colorado, there's a team that could end up being in Columbus if Ohio State loses the Big Ten championship game in the first round.
Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. Or you could Colorado, I think theoretically could play in the Big 12 championship game, could win it. So that could actually be your second
round. Yeah.
round game. And boy, I think Ohio State would happily take that as a second round game. No offense to the Colorado Buffaloes. Number 19, Kansas State, Will Howard's former team, checking in at number 19. This is a lot of respect for the Big 12, it feels like.
Yeah. Why?
Speaking of why, number 18, Pitt, who just lost by 12,000 points.
Because the Big Ten is top heavy, and everybody else is pretty meh. So
got to have some teams.
You load up the top half of the rankings with all the SEC teams, and you load up the bottom half with all the Big 12 teams, then there you go.
Man, here's another one. Number 17, Iowa State. Boy, the Big 12 is getting a lot. The Big 12 is getting a lot more love from the committee than they are from the AP poll. Number 16, Ole Miss,
which is what they are in the AP.
Yep.
And really, they would probably have to win out now. They would have to win out now at this point to make it.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, they have used their mulligans, and that is that.
Yeah, I'm sure Lane Kiffin will be fine. He's best when he's got his back against the wall.
And we have a long delay before we get to number 15 for some reason. Number 15, hey, speaking of ignoring week 1 results, the LSU Titan Tigers. Bayou Bengals checking in at number 15.
In fairness, it does feel like a lifetime ago that USC beat them. And losing to USC should not count against you because clearly that was a farce. That's not the same team that would be here now. If you play the game right now, there's no way USC would win that. So let's just, you know what, write it off. Never happened.
They've made a quarterback change. Miller Moss is not their starting quarterback anymore.
And so LSU, they have Alabama this week. Somebody's getting eliminated, right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one right there. Somebody's going to get that third loss.
So there's your updated graphic with 15 through 25 and your first 4 out on the right-hand side. Just to run through it again, 15 LSU, 16 Ole Miss, 17 Iowa State, 18 Pitt, 19 Kansas State, 20 Colorado, 21 Washington State, 22 Louisville, 23 Clemson, 24 Missouri, 25 Army.
And I will bring a scroll in once we have the entire top 25.
And so now they're doing it in a bracket. Texas A&M number 14, SMU number 13. So those are your next 2 guys out.
SMU still obviously has plenty of time to move up and win that conference. You know, it's interesting. They lost early, and it was like, well, it was a nice idea while we had it that the SMU could do something in the ACC, and now they've just continued to do what they want. They're 8-1 now and looking pretty decent. They got we'll see what happens. Well, and with Clemson losing,
they just announced Boise State is the number 12 team right now, which is not a big surprise, but we have our first team on the bracket.
And they may stay there all year long. the rest of the way out.
Number 11, Alabama Crimson Tide.
And then if they lose, LSU would probably just go right about there.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that feels like one of those teams is going to be in the rankings and the other one is not next week. So, and they play each other. So,
and they won't drop Alabama too far or LSU too far. Won't drop them out of the rankings, that's for sure. So somebody's going to end up with a ranked win.
Now they're showing us Bama highlights in case you're unfamiliar with this team. They are from the state of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. They're the Crimson Tide.
Thank you to our co-host, Deshaun Foster.
Yes. That's what I was going for. That is what I was going for.
You LA people. So now we're waiting for the top 10. We've got Notre Dame, BYU, Indiana.
Notre Dame is next. Notre Dame number 10.
So one more team, then they will be your teams that would have road games in the first round.
And I'm going to assume 9 is going to be BYU. Should be Tennessee. The way the committee likes the Big 12 so
9
far.
is BYU.
Yeah, they don't like the Big 12 that much.
Yeah. But because BYU is number 9, they slot in as the number 4 team in the bracket because they're projected as the conference champion. So this is where you start getting into the wonkiness of the top 4 conference champions getting the top 4 seeds.
And that sets up that we're 5, what their path could be. Boise, hosting Boise, and then playing BYU, I guess, in the Fiesta.
Yes, the Big 12 champion is going to go to the Fiesta Bowl. That is the New Year's Eve bowl game this year. The conference tie-ins, the contracts from the previous setup, the 4-team playoff, are still in effect this year and next year. There's 2 more years of that. So the Big 10 champion is going to go to the Rose Bowl for the playoff quarterfinals. The SEC champion is going to go to the Sugar Bowl for the playoff quarterfinals. The ACC champion, if the Orange Bowl was a quarterfinal instead of a semifinal, would go to the Orange Bowl. This year it's a semifinal, so this year the ACC champion is going to go to the Peach Bowl, and the Big 12 champion is going to go to the Fiesta Bowl. All of those games are on New Year's Day, except for the Fiesta Bowl. That's a New Year's Eve game this year. It'll be Peach Bowl at noon on New Year's Day, Rose Bowl in its traditional late afternoon slot on New Year's Day, and then the Sugar Bowl at night on New Year's Day.
Indiana is 8 in the rankings, but 9 because of the way that the math works in this, and they would get a road game in the first round of the playoffs as it stands now.
I'm going to guess that number 8 is Tennessee. They haven't put that up yet, but that feels like we should be seeing Tennessee pretty soon because Tennessee's not been. Yes, I was correct. Tennessee number 8. That felt like, for some reason, it feels like Indiana and Tennessee play each other in bowl games a lot. So it would be really funny if they played in the first round of the CFP this year as well. That game would be in Neyland if the season ended right now, which obviously it does not. That game would be in Neyland. Tennessee, the number 7 seed on the number 7 ranked team, number 8 seed.
Yeah,
we have to be real precise with our language here.
That's a shame. Indiana at Tennessee. Make it the other way around.
I'd watch it.
Any Indiana playoff game this year, whether they're the 2 seed or the 12 seed, I am going to be fascinated by. That is one of the most remarkable stories I can remember in college football over the last few years. That is an incredible story.
Well, and think of the pressure it puts on every other program in the nation that has been mired in mediocrity, including the one in Indiana as well, Purdue, dealing with what they're dealing with. Like, if Indiana can do that with FCS players and MAC players, granted they're all like 27 years old, but there is a path forward for a lot of programs if you get the right guy as a coach and then make the right moves in the portal.
Penn State is the number 6 ranked team and the number 7 seeded team. So they're going to take on. They would host Notre Dame in this.
I'd watch that too.
Yep.
I wonder if the Penn State fans would. They sure didn't seem interested in football. Kind of
quick on us because they just dropped Texas in there.
Yeah, I assume Texas is the next one.
Yes.
They popped up. Okay, number 5, Texas. Number 5, Texas, which would then make them the 6th seed, so they would play Alabama. Now, we'll get to this in a minute, but you got a lot of potential matchups, or you may have, there's a potential rematch game there, Texas and Alabama, which the committee has said they're not going to reseed to avoid it. So
right, and they said they wouldn't do any shuffling, even if it's close. They're going to rank them as they rank them, and the matchups are what they are.
So that to me means Ohio State is obviously going to be the 5 seed. They are
whether they're 2 or 3.
We'll see. They could be ranked 2 or they could be ranked 5.
So this will be Miami.
Miami is 5. Yep. Sorry, Miami's 4.
Miami's 4.
Yes,
but they are the 3. So Alabama, Texas would feed into them.
Yep.
And then I don't think there's too much drama. This is going to be Ohio State and then Georgia and then Oregon.
I could make an argument for Ohio State being 2. I really can, because of game control and everything else. And Carson Beck is a turnover machine. And, I could make an argument. I'm not saying that I would win, but
yeah. Well, I mean, the way that Carson Beck has been playing, all the interceptions he's been throwing, it's not trending well. So I don't know. I mean, the committee is going to take everything into account, but they also take into account that it's the SEC. So you're powerless to stop them. But we will see. I will gladly be wrong because it rarely happens, and it's fun for you guys to get to see it.
Number 3, Georgia Bulldogs. So Ohio State
in the face.
Ohio State is ahead of Georgia. Boy, it would be real funny if they put Oregon ahead of, or Ohio State ahead of Oregon. I don't expect that to happen. I don't think that would go over real well if it did happen.
Head-to-head doesn't always matter.
Yeah, so we've been told over the years. Yes.
So it looks like just as everybody predicted. But I was right about the Ohio State at 5. In fact, right behind me right now, I've got Ohio State hosting Boise State in the snow with 3:45 left in the third quarter. Buckeyes are up 21-3. Conditions are not ideal. Wow.
I would slow down Ashton Janty.
So now they will react. And we can do the same as we look at these matchups. And I don't know what, Kevin, if you're looking at this, what, and you guys in the chat can go ahead and throw stuff out. What jumps out to you about this one? Would you take this Ohio State road if it means another loss to Oregon? Because you got to factor that in. Right now, yes, you would definitely take Boise State and then BYU. But as Tom says, the monkey paw in this is that Oregon has to beat Ohio State in Indianapolis. So will you guys take that, Kevin? Is that an acceptable fate for the Buckeyes?
I think that winning the Big Ten title means a lot. I know it doesn't mean as much as winning the national championship, but that means that they're going to play each other 3 times, because Oregon is at 1 and 5 would end up feeding into that bracket. So you would have that game happen at some point. I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to beat somebody 3 times. I do not see that happening in this current iteration of how things work. I just think that if you play that extra game, you open up the opportunity for injuries and things like that. And yes, okay, playing Boise and then playing BYU is, they're on paper not the most difficult games compared to what is in here with these top 12 teams. But if you're Ohio State and you're in that 1 seed, and with the way this bracket is set up, and you're drawing, you get a first round bye, and then you get Indiana, Tennessee winner. I mean, maybe it's going to be a little more challenging game. You would potentially have to beat Indiana for a second time. I'm about the hardware. Win the Big Ten.
Yeah,
that's what I want. That's what I'd want.
I'm looking at this, and I think winning the Big Ten and your road still isn't that bad with Indiana, Tennessee. And I say that bad. You'll have a better idea of what Indiana would be. And if you beat Indiana, they're not going to be there. But there would be something to Oregon hosting Boise State again in the first round, and how Boise State would approach that one. I'm sure, Tom, they would love to get another shot at the Ducks.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think Ohio State would. I think Boise State would. I think, those are 2 teams that probably feel like they weren't that far from winning those games. And we have not seen a ton of times when you see teams play twice in a year. I don't think we've never seen teams play 3 times in a year. So is Tez Johnson out for the year? I heard earlier
there are very real rumors about that. And
earlier today there was some conversation that he was not going to be out for the year, but maybe that has
collarbone, and just got to be fair to the kid. I mean,
yeah. So either way, we have not seen a ton of teams having to play twice in a year. And just thinking back through them, a lot of the times you see teams play twice in a year, the ones that at least jump out in my head, Georgia beat Alabama, or Alabama beat Georgia, and then Georgia beat Alabama a couple of years ago. And then I go back to Georgia,
LSU, Alabama.
LSU and Alabama, where LSU won that rock fight 9-6 or whatever it was, and then at Georgia didn't cross midfield in the national championship game. Even going back to like Florida State in '96, Florida State won the regular season game, and then Florida thumped them in the Sugar Bowl 52-20 to win the national championship.
Ohio State, UCLA, way back when.
Yeah. Now, this is Bryant Ragsdale says the extra game stance is a non-issue. Some have to play an extra game, which is conference championship. Yes, but then the loser of the conference championship also has to play another game. That's true for Notre Dame, because Notre Dame, there's no way Notre Dame plays in a conference championship game, so they're going to have to play an extra game in the college football playoff, but that kind of cancels itself out. The losers of the conference championship games, you would rather, if you're Ohio State and you could be number 5 without going to the Big Ten championship game, you'd rather do that than have to play in the Big Ten championship game and lose and then be number 5, because then you're playing an extra game. Then you've got 5 games. And that's how you get to 17 games potentially this season. It's going to be very interesting to see whether having that first round bye is an advantage or a disadvantage, and how big of an advantage it provides. You assume it would provide an advantage just because you have 0% chance of losing the first game, but then are you rested or are you rusty? I tend to think it's going to be more rested, because it's not what was the 2006 layoff?
Like 45 days or
50
something.
days or something.
Yeah.
So you're not looking at a 50-day layoff, but if you play on December 7th and then you don't play again until New Year's Day, it's like 3 weeks and some change. For the teams that have to play a game in the middle there, it's kind of just, you're still kind of in the rhythm of the season almost, where you have 2 weeks off and then you have 10 days or so. So, and I think everyone has thoughts on how that might go, but we'll see when it actually happens. And I also think the difference between the number 3 seed ACC champion, different number 4 seed Big 12 champion, those teams could be underdogs, even though they're the higher seeds.
Yeah, I'm looking at the possibility of the winner of Alabama versus Texas playing Miami and thinking, well, I'm taking the over in that one. Just whatever it is, go ahead and take the over. Indiana or Tennessee against Oregon, that should be a shootout as well.
Let me jump in really quick. Think about this. That Miami game against the winner of Alabama, Texas, is that at the Peach?
The Miami game against the winner of Alabama and Texas is at the Peach Bowl, yes.
So you are playing an SEC country, and okay, it doesn't matter as much for Texas as, first year in the SEC, but if Alabama beats Texas and then you have to play, congratulations, ACC champion, you have to play Alabama in where they normally play the SEC championship games. So, no favors there. No favors there.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is the semifinal locations. And this is all stuff that, because we know what the process is, we know where the semifinals would be. Oregon is the 1 seed. The 2 semifinals are the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And the semifinal locations are chosen based on which is closer to the number 1 seed. So the number 1 seed is Oregon. So the closer of those 2 bowls would be the Cotton Bowl. So the top half of the bracket, the Oregon/Ohio State/BYU/Tennessee side of the bracket, that would feed into the Cotton Bowl on, I forget which one is first. I think the Cotton Bowl second on the 10th. And the lower half of the bracket, which includes Miami, whose home stadium is the Orange Bowl, or the site of the Orange Bowl, would be the Orange Bowl. So you could be number 2 Georgia having to play number 3 Miami at number 3 Miami's home stadium. But don't feel too bad for the Dogs, because then the national championship game is back in Atlanta. So Oregon or Ohio State or whoever comes out of the top half of that bracket could have to play Georgia in Georgia.
Yeah, pretty much the top half of that bracket is all closer to the Cotton Bowl, so that would be where they would go. But yeah, the just looking over the Notre Dame Penn State thing excites me more than one of those teams playing Georgia. Georgia right now just does nothing for me, and frankly, the winner of that playing against Georgia does nothing for me. I'm excited more about the first round stuff on campus sites, and then you get to the more sterile environments of the bowl games. It's less sterile than the national championship game, those sites, the NFL stadiums. So it's just looking, the Alabama at Texas feels like that's kind of old hat now, but the loser's eliminated. So we don't even know yet what these are going to feel like watching them live and what the crowds are going to be like when you know that this is your last stand and this is the last time you're going to be in this stadium facing and cheering your team on, but also if you lose, it's done. So the emotions are going to be unlike anything else, I think. And I know we're all looking forward to it, and not going to wish away the rest of the season, though. Please don't.
No.
Well, you and I talked about this earlier today. Ohio State is 2/3 of the way through their regular season. That does not feel possible. It's November already. We're looking at 4 weeks to, a 4-week sprint to the end of the season, ending in the Michigan game on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And then the Saturday after that, basically 1 month and 2 days from now is the conference championship game weekend. 1 month and 1 day from now is when you get those Friday games. It is, that is coming real fast. Rufunky says, have they explained why the bracket does not reshuffle so that the lowest remaining seed plays the highest? That's not how most of these things will go. There are certain ones, like baseball, for example, does not reshuffle. The NCAA tournament doesn't reshuffle. Does football, does the NFL playoff reshuffle?
I don't
I'm a
believe.
Cowboys fan. I don't pay attention to the playoffs.
I'm a Bears fan. I couldn't tell you. And frankly, I'm working on Sundays anyway. And in Columbus, we only get to see the Browns and the Bengals, so we don't really get the NFL here. So I couldn't tell you.
But yeah, that's a pretty standard thing, and they have everything in here. As soon as on Selection Sunday, which will be Sunday, December 8th, whatever this bracket is at that point, it is locked.
Yeah.
The top half of that bracket is going to, in this case, would be going to the Cotton Bowl, and it doesn't matter if Oregon gets knocked out. It doesn't matter if it's Indiana and Ohio State. They would be playing in the Cotton Bowl. And the bottom half of the bracket would be playing in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
Once the thing is set on Selection Sunday, that's it. That's your bracket moving forward. Which, I guess if you're trying to make plans, this could be a pain in the butt for people to make travel plans. If you're a fan and you're trying to go, you're a Alabama fan, and okay, you got to fly to Austin the first round, and then the second round, well, then you got to go to Atlanta to see for the Peach Bowl in the second round, and then if you make it there, then you got to go to the Orange Bowl in the third round, and then you got to go back to Atlanta in the fourth round. That's a lot of travel,
though. I mean, but yeah, it's going to be tough. To think about us poor media members who are going to have to figure this stuff out and everything else.
Well,
all the Marriott points.
Even the coaches that are having to advance scout legally their future opponents, at least who is in your side of the bracket. If you're reshuffling, you're like, how many assistants, how many staffers are we putting through all of the – you look at Oregon, you look at Miami, you look at Georgia, you look at BYU, because we might be getting them in 2 weeks.
Real BJM, it's easy when you're poor, no plans needed. Boy, that is –
stress-free,
right
your
there.
lips to God's ears.
Yeah. And Signiag says those are all drivable for Bama fans. Yeah, I mean that was just the line on the bracket that I picked. Ohio State, you get a home game the first game, and then you're going to Phoenix, which is not drivable, and then you're going to Dallas, which is drivable. Tony and I have driven that before, but it is a haul.
It's not advisable.
Then you're going to Atlanta, which is drivable, but that's also a bunch of hotels. Tickets are not going to be super cheap for probably a lot of these. I'm fascinated to see what the first round ticket price and ticket demand is like, because you're looking at, are people going to be so excited to see a home game that it's going to be insane demand? Or are people going to look at, okay, well, that's the first round game, but I might hold my money to go to one of the later games and then take the chance that they make it that far.
I think you're looking at it like, well, I wouldn't have to get a hotel necessarily, so I can spend more on this game. And the other games are going to be expensive. This one's a bargain. The home game is going to be the spring game of tickets, basically, in terms of it's not going to be free. but relative to everything else, it's going to be cheaper. So I think the demand is certainly going to be there. Yeah, I'm interested as well to see how high those go and how low they come back down when the prices on the resale market are going to be astronomical until nobody's buying them, and then they'll come down. And what are they, 2 hours before kickoff? And if whoever is hosting a game, like I get annoyed when I'm watching Ohio State and you can see empty seats in the south stands and where towards the top of the stadium. If anybody is hosting a playoff game and you've got empty seats, it better be because the tickets couldn't resell. Like all of those should have been sold, but then you just priced yourself out of getting anybody else to buy those, and that's why they're empty seats. There better not be any unsold tickets for a playoff game.
Well, but think of this for the home games too. I mean, the money is not about butts and seats. I mean, obviously the cities want to be able to have the additional home game, or the bowl game wants to have the economic impact or whatever. But all the money of this that ESPN coughed up and everything else is about television. But just imagine if things had flipped around a little bit and you had to go to Provo or you had to go to Boise or something like that. That's, which flight do I want to take to Boise? The 6, the 7, or the 8? That's not necessarily going to be the case. So the travel nightmares could be even worse than we're talking about. Highly unlikely that it's going to be a case of where you're going to be dealing with BYU or Boise or something like that. But all of that's in play potentially.
Provo, Spain.
Okay, I'm in.
No Fletch fans, come on.
In.
Say Utah, come on.
Let me give you an update. Final 21-3, Ohio State has defeated Boise State. They will be advancing on.
Put the BYU game on.
All right, I'm gonna go jump on the teleconference. I'll be back in a little bit, and we'll have the BYU game on by then.
All right, sounds good. So we've got a couple that I wanted to get to real quickly. Ethan asked, "Where is the Natty this year?" It is in Atlanta this year, so you could potentially have Georgia playing in, if Georgia is the 2 seed, the SEC champion goes to the Sugar Bowl. So they would play in the Sugar Bowl. So that's in New Orleans, which is an easy drive for Georgia fans. The playoff semifinals is in the Orange Bowl, which if you've ever driven down Florida, it is not, Georgia is a relatively long state, and Athens and Atlanta are both relatively high up. So it's a longer drive than you think it is, but it's still a drive. It's drivable there. And then the national championship in Atlanta, which is a very easy drive for Georgia fans. So definitely
kick them out of the playoffs.
Yeah, in terms of proximity, closer for the folks in the South.
We need to get some major bowl games in Detroit and Indy. We have had the national championship game in Indy, and that was a year where Ohio State had everything lined up perfectly. And womp womp.
Yep. Yeah, that's hurry back, Tony. So say we all.
No.
Yeah. Now, Rick S with some real. Here's the one that I really want to see. Make Alabama fans drive to Pullman, Washington. There are scenarios. Now, Washington State 21 right now. They're not going to get to a top 8 spot this year just because they don't have games on their schedule that are going to be quality wins enough to get them that high in the rankings. But that's the dream is
you have to
Boise plays well enough to be the 8th seed, and then you make Tennessee go up to Boise, or you make, even Penn State having a home game, or Ohio State having a home game, having one of the SEC teams having to go up there as opposed to Notre Dame or Boise State that are used to the cold weather. That's kind of the dream. Is we have seen Miami in the Pinstripe Bowl before, and they are very clearly do not want, respectfully decline. Everyone is sitting out the bowl game whether they're there or not. And if you get a Miami in Columbus, or a Miami in State College, or a Miami in South Bend, something like that, you could have a real weather advantage. Because December 20th, the 21st, I mean, think about Christmas in Columbus. Sometimes it's cold and snowy. Sometimes it's 45 degrees and rainy. Sometimes it's
65.
Yeah, sometimes it's 65. You don't really know. But I mean, even Miami playing in the Pinstripe Bowl, even when it was 50, you've got the sideline heaters going and all that kind of stuff. They are just not. They are not built for that, and it's understandable. But yeah, that's kind of the dream.
Just kind of going through some things here. I mean, real BJM, better idea. Let's have a down year where the SEC has 2 teams only in the CFP. Well, that's not going to really ever be the case because part of the 14-team playoff is 4 for the Big Ten and 4 for the SEC, and everybody else can kind of fend for themselves at that point. So I don't think you're going to see any years where things are that thin. I think the best news would be where the SEC had maybe one really good team and then everybody else was kind of middling and they were kind of toward the bottom of the rankings, and then they would have to do some travel. But I'm not overly sure that we would ever see a situation of where there would be 3 SEC teams that would be on the outside looking in and having to do road games. I mean, just seeing Alabama at 11, and of course, at Alabama at 11 could be LSU. I mean, this is just here, week 1. There's a lot of football left to be played. There's still four weeks of the regular season and conference championship game. So, this is just a snapshot in time right now. I promise you, it's not going to look like this at the end.
And if you just go through by conference, 4 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams, and 1 each from the Big 12, the ACC, the Mountain West, and the Independents with Notre Dame. So everyone other than the Big 2, which has sort of been branded the Big 2 now, the Big 10 and the SEC, everyone else getting just 1 spot each. We'll see that,
So much for your Big 12 love.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. What I think that's setting up is if BYU loses, then you're potentially getting 2 Big 12 teams in, potentially. Now, BYU is 9th, so they could potentially fall just a couple spots. If BYU wins out and they're 7th going into conference championship week, and then they lose to SMU, you could have SMU as SMU's in the ACC. Goodness. Why would I think a Texas team belongs in the Big 12?
Come on, get it right.
Goodness. Yeah, it is. The struggle is extremely real right now. Yeah, Iowa State. If Iowa State wins, they get the automatic top 4 spot, and then you could have BYU potentially sneaking in there. So, oh boy, here's one from Jeff Frazier. So if Ohio State wins and goes to Texas, Kevin, will you attempt to break your pickle chip record? Inquiring minds want to know.
I broke my In-N-Out record of a 4x4 with a 6x6. I am retired from pickle eating. That is just not going to happen. I didn't feel great for a couple hours after that. I love our viewers. If you love me back, sign up for BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's the best way that you can show me love. But I don't know. I think we would probably need about 2,500 new signups for me to paid signups for me to attempt anything else with the pickles. And with that, I might just beat it by 1 because that was a rough night. It was a rough night.
Yeah, I think this is something we've talked about in the past is if you want to know what they want to do with the top of the rankings, look at what they're doing at the bottom of the rankings. And what's interesting is there's no Iowa in there. There's no Minnesota in there. There are 4 Big Ten teams at the top, and then there's nothing else. And that tells me that if you're a Big Ten team, you'd better win. You better win your clunkers because you're not getting a lot of benefit of the doubt. No one on Indiana's schedule other than Ohio State is in the top 25. So Indiana has a chance to win 1 ranked game this year based on the current schedule. Excuse me, the current rankings. So that they better win their clunkers. Penn State better win your clunkers because they do not play Indiana. They do not play Oregon. They've already lost to Ohio State. They would not have a ranked win outside of if they finish 11-1. If they finish 11-1, they'll be fine. If they finish 10-2, you are potentially in some danger. They're right now on the show putting up their All-State playoff predictor, which is brought to you by False Precision. They say that 96% chance that Oregon makes the playoff, 87% that Georgia makes the playoff, 92% for Miami, 91% for Ohio State, 86% for Indiana, 77 for Texas, 73 for Penn State. Now, the odds that they win the title, Kevin, what do you, are you cheating? No cheating.
No, I'm right. I'll stop looking.
What are the two teams?
I flipped away because
What are the two teams that they had the highest odds to win the college football playoff?
You see, I know what like the betting odds are, but as you know, this whole rigmarole with all of that, I mean, I would say, I think Oregon and Ohio State eat into each other's numbers to a certain extent because one's going to cannibalize the other. Georgia and Oregon, I don't know.
Ohio State at 17% and Texas at 15%. Georgia at only 9%, Oregon at 9%, Miami at 8%, Indiana at 6%. I mean, that feels bizarre to me. That feels like I have questions about the data inputs that you're using to calculate all that. But, you know, Ohio State being the most likely, I mean, I can see it. They had a very close game on the road against the number 1 team in the country, just won against the number 6 team in the country in the playoff ranking. So, you know, they are certainly up there.
They have a game against 8. So, I mean,
Yep.
Ohio State will. There are a lot of people saying Ohio State's schedule is pillow soft or whatever. Yes, they played 3 group of 5 teams in the non-conference, but with at least one game against Oregon, with Penn State and with Indiana, I mean, Ohio State drew a difficult hand, whereas we talked about earlier, Tom mentioned earlier, Penn State only has really the one challenging game. Indiana really only has the one challenging game.
And Ohio State just became the second team since 1996 to play 2 top 5 matchup of top 5 teams on the road in the same season. Georgia just did it as well. Georgia did it against Alabama and Texas. Ohio State did it against Oregon and Penn State. They're the first 2 teams since 1996 to do that. Both of those teams split those 2 games. So I think that probably makes it more difficult to say, yeah, ain't played nobody. And just to provide a little context around that, because I know people are probably wondering, why is Ohio State playing a crappy non-conference schedule this year? Because they have a long history of playing at least one really good non-conference team every year. They've had series with Notre Dame recently. They have a series with Texas starting next year. They've got Alabama and Georgia on the schedule in coming years. They were supposed to play Washington out of conference this year when Washington was a Pac-12 team. And then when the conference realignment thing went through, all of a sudden that was now 2 teams in the same conference. So that series got canceled. And then Ohio State had to throw another team on there. I think was it Marshall they threw on there?
I think Marshall was the ad, if I remember right.
Yeah. So, you know, there was supposed to be a Power 5 team on the non-conference schedule this year. And that was, I think there was Texas had something. I think Texas lost schedule, or Oregon or Oklahoma. One of them was in the same situation where they were supposed to play one of these teams out of conference, and then it ended up being turned into a conference game. And so you lost what should have been a quality non-conference game. So that's kind of one of just a little bit of the context there in terms of that. Sorry, I had a
I was going to say we want to get
there.
Nick.
Yeah, he says, am I the only one that thinks the bye team should host a playoff game too? It seems weird that the non-conference champs get a cool experience while the conference champs don't.
It's not about cool experiences. This is about winning a natty. And I mean, it would be cool, but you know what's cooler? Getting, having an extra week, 10 days or whatever to rest and recoup and maybe have, a couple of days of planning of what it is that, working on yourself and then worrying about install once you know who your opponent is going to be. So, and it wouldn't be a bye week if you had a game in theory. So, I mean, it's got to be one or the other. I think that it's good having the four teams with the true buys.
Well, and this is also a result of trying to sort of split the baby between you want to have these home games and you want to theoretically make it not absolutely impossible for people to travel to all of these games, but also to keep the folks in the ugly Blazers happy. They want to keep the folks in charge want to keep the bowl people involved, to get bowl games involved to some degree. Because if you are a bowl game that is not part of the college football playoff, you are largely irrelevant at this point.
Meaningless exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure, like, it'll be great to have on the TV while you're, you have family over or whatever in the days after Christmas, whatever it is. But it's not anything that's going to move the needle in any meaningful way. It just is TV inventory for ESPN in that week between Christmas and New Year's, basically. So they want to, they have these existing bowl contracts right now, and that's for the next 2 seasons. So the college football playoff has the existing contracts with the 6 bowl games that are part of this in the quarterfinals and the semifinals this year and next year. After that, we don't know what the format's going to be. There's only 2 years of this 12-team format. After that, it could be 14 teams. It could be 16 teams. They could theoretically get rid of the bowl games. They could theoretically include the bowl games more. They could theoretically bid these things out and just say, like the Super Bowl, hey, this year the Super Bowl's in Detroit. This year the Super Bowl's in Indianapolis. This year the Super Bowl's in Tampa. This year's the Super Bowl's in New Orleans, whatever it is. You could bid it out like that and have the semifinals done that way. They could have, if it's 16 teams, you could have everyone, the top 8 seeds get a home game in the first round. This is just sort of this like weird in-between period. This is not going to be the long-term format, almost certainly. If we're just speculating right now, I would guess you end up at 14, and then the top 2 teams, which will shockingly frequently be the SEC champion and the Big Ten champion in some order, they will get a first-round bye, and then teams 3 through 8 or 3 through 7 will have 3 through 8 would have a home game in that first round. But that's 2 years down the road. So sort of put a pin in that thought right now. This is not going to be the format long term. This is just probably a 2-year thing.
I like this question that I punched up. With 14 to 18 team conferences, they just need to do away with non-conference, maybe one. I think that as conferences grow, you want to play more conference games. I don't know if 11 is a weird number to do that if you're going to have a 12-team season, but I think 10 league games is not out of the realm. And you're going to get 5 at home, 5 on the road, and then you would have your two non-conference, and maybe you would get rid of these Big Ten SEC type of games because a lot of ADs are going to tell you need 7 home games in order to make sure the trains run. But, I don't know. I mean, maybe if the post-game monies are so big and the TV monies are so big that it's going to help you get by some of that, but that's not going to help the varsity club on campus. That's not going to help, any of these other people that are used to having that type of income. So, I don't know what the answer is, but how about this? How about uniformity? Play 8 or play 9, and everybody's got to do that. And then if it's play 10, I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, I think you're trending towards probably everyone playing 9 conference games at least. Big Ten right now plays 9. SEC plays 8. There's been talk about a Big Ten SEC scheduling arrangement, which that has not come out in terms of specifics, what that might look like. But is it like a Big Ten ACC challenge from basketball from years gone by where you basically go boom, 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 and everyone plays? That would be great in terms of having data across conferences. In terms of right now, you can look and you have, LSU played USC and UCLA, and then they lost to USC and they beat UCLA. So now we're going to make a judgment on how good the rest of the conferences are based on that, and then based on, just sort of projecting that over everything else. I think it was the College Football Nerds had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about the fact that right now judging conferences where you don't have a lot of overlap is like looking at a picture of the Alps and looking at a picture of the Himalayas, and it's like, boy, those both look like real tall mountains. Which ones are taller? I don't know, because you can't see them next to each other to really know. That's what you're kind of trying to do with conferences right now, is how good is the top of the SEC versus how good is the top of the Big Ten? We don't really know because Ohio State hasn't played anyone from the SEC. Oregon hasn't played anyone from the SEC. Alabama played Wisconsin, which Wisconsin's like the 9th best team in the Big Ten. So how much did we learn from the fact that the 4th best team in the SEC beat the 9th best team in the Big Ten by a bunch? Probably not a lot. So, Georgia hasn't played anyone in the Big Ten. Texas played Michigan, but Michigan again is, so that's the 2nd best team in the SEC playing the
16th best
10th, 12th best team in the Big Ten. I mean, so you don't have great data points right now to combine or to compare schools across conferences. So ideally, you'd love to have a consistent set of data where the SEC teams are all playing 9 teams in their conference plus a Big Ten team. And then you'd have a pretty good comparison point. Here's one. Ward Manual on why Miami is ranked so much higher than BYU. Quote, it really came down to more of an eye test. I mean, Miami is exciting. They're more exciting than BYU, but Miami very easily could have 2 losses. Miami is very fortunate to have not lost to Cal, and that was an officiating thing that came down to, am I remembering that right, that was a
there were a couple games where there were some calls.
And then the Virginia Tech game came down to a Hail Mary in the back of the end zone, and did someone catch it and did someone not, and it went to replay. And so here's one. Ohio State's win at Penn State impressed the committee, and their game against Oregon came down to the wire. They're 5-1 against teams with winning records. So this is Tony putting this in based on the conference call with Ward Manual right now. I mean, that's Ohio State's record, I think, is pretty straightforward why they would be, if Ohio State was number 3 right now and not number 2, I would have zero problem with it. Georgia has a good win. Ohio State has a good win. Georgia has a close top 5 road loss. Ohio State has a close top 5 road loss. So, I think those teams are probably, we'll see when Tony gets on. My guess would be that those 2 teams are probably fairly close in the committee's mind right now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty, I don't want to say razor thin, but I think it's pretty close where they stand. And again, these are the first rankings. And to go back to what Tony said, thinking that Tom was going to ask about 2014, or maybe it was the other way around, and Mississippi State was number 1, and they did not sniff the playoffs much longer after that. So you just, you don't know, you don't book your travel plans based on this bracket or anything else. I mean, I would say that you might want to sit there and consider if you have a lot of free money that you'd like to tie up into airfare, sure, book the Rose Bowl, because that's where Ohio State potentially could go if they're the seed that's going to determine that. But I can't even sit there and say that for certain.
Well, and here's a little travel tip for you. If you are thinking about going to a quarterfinal game, you can book your flight to the Rose Bowl as soon as you are confident that Ohio State has won the Big Ten championship game. If Ohio State's up by 30 points at halftime in the Big Ten championship game, or at the end of the 3rd quarter, whatever point you're like, okay, they've got this, the Big Ten champion goes to the Rose Bowl, period, full stop. They are playing in the Big Ten. The team that is standing on the stage with the confetti in Indianapolis will be playing in the Rose Bowl at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on New Year's Day in Pasadena, California, period, full stop. So if you want to book your travel for that, that's when you can do that, and you could feel safe doing that. So just to let a little travel tip from some folks who have booked some travel to bowl games once or twice in the past. Here's another one from Tony on why Ohio State over Georgia at 2. Quote, it was a close analysis, but in the end, we just felt that Ohio State was a more consistent performer at this time. This is one, Kevin, that's one of those quotes, Kevin, that we've heard these quotes from the committee over the years. And my biggest takeaway from that is they will feel 0% beholden to be intellectually consistent with that next year, next week.
Next week. I mean,
if anything changes, if anything changes, if Ohio State is even sluggish in the first half against Purdue, it won't matter. Or if Georgia, and that's true the other way. This will be a week full of conspiracies across these United States of America. I'm sure one way or the other. But
every year we try to figure out, and we'll get to Tony's next comment here. Every year we try to figure out what the committee values, and in a lot of ways, I think we know even less this time because we're looking at the cheese that is what the bracket is and everything else, and maybe not as much at what the top 25 is, and we don't know per se of if they value where wins are, where losses are, where game control is, where any of this stuff is. So I mean, if you didn't play anybody, so we're not going to reward you, or well, you can't control who your schedule is, so we're not going to dock you. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, and you'll hear them talk. We've heard this year after year after year, where they'll talk about one team and they'll say, well, their quality of their strength of record was really the deciding factor. And then you've got another team that has a better strength of record. And it's like, well, but I put another team ahead of them because of game control. It's like, well, you just said the other, and that's just, there is not
they contradict themselves all the time.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. They will say one thing and then they'll say another thing, and everyone will, yell and scream and throw stuff, and it doesn't matter. And, these conference calls are always a little bit, but you just said a minute ago, and it doesn't matter. So that's just kind of how it is. That is, welcome to the human element, Kevin. They talk about that with robo umps in baseball. That is why they have a committee instead of the old BCS computers and rankings. It's for the human element. You brought something up earlier that I do want to touch on, because this is one of the things that you don't really think about all that much around playoff games, around bowl games, all that kind of stuff. That is the economic impact in some of these cities. If Ohio State has a home game, I know there is a bar close to the stadium that makes they're profitable for the year based on Ohio State home games, period. The 7 Ohio State home games, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 8, but the 7, whatever Ohio State home games, they are profitable for the year off of those games. And that's true of a lot of other businesses. It's true of restaurants and hotels. If you have a hotel and you can make people have a 2-night minimum, and you're not charging the full rack rate probably, but you're charging a good number. That makes a big difference for a lot of these, not just hotels, but even the mom and pop kind of restaurants around campus and all that kind of stuff. That makes a big difference in the bottom line. The other thing that I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about it was, in terms of the tickets, this is a time when students are not going to be on campus. Ohio State semester ends around December 10th or 12th or something like that, I think. So this is going to be a period where you don't have all the students on campus. So, I'm sure a lot of them obviously are from Ohio, and a lot of them would probably come back if there is a home game on December 20th or 21st. But you might have more tickets to sell because you might not have as many of those student tickets taken for that game, because you don't have students
allotment for the other team. I mean, than the 3,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so there's a lot of different pieces of this that I think, this is not anything that is the deciding factor in anything here, or, the biggest piece of why this is important or anything, but just a couple other pieces around the college football playoff and this new format that just are things just sort of to think about.
I want to get back to Tony. We have a couple on here. Ohio State's 1 point loss on the road to Oregon was a very strong game. That was better than Georgia's loss to Alabama. That was on the road, but it didn't have the same impressiveness that I'm assuming there's going to be that Ohio State or something. All right, here's. Oh, okay. There's another one behind there that we didn't get to as well, which was about the offensive line. The Ohio State's been more consistent, top 5 defense. They've had changes on the O-line and still performed. And for us, it was the consistency. So what I'm hearing is, don't come out and fart around with Purdue and Northwestern the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's been a thing for Ryan Day all year, is leave no doubt. They have left a little bit of doubt the last couple of weeks against Nebraska and Penn State. You want to come out, they want to play young guys. They want to, be able to rest some of the starters. You want to see some different guys. You want to try some different stuff. You got to kind of handle your business. You don't want to, we've said win your clunkers, but ideally you don't have clunkers. You want to just sort of handle your business and have it be a game where it's halftime and you're up by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, whatever. And the rest of the nation is saying boring and flipping the channel.
Nathan Montgomery here says, I heard someone say that the number 1 Big Ten team would pick Atlanta to not give Georgia the home field advantage. That's not an option, really.
Yeah, Atlanta is, so the quarterfinal games, which are the first games that the conference champions play in. So that's the New Year's Eve / New Year's Day games. those are controlled by the existing bowl contracts, because the first contract for the college football playoff, the expanded 14 college football playoff, there's 2 more years on those contracts. They expanded this 2 years early. So those bowl games are still tied to the conferences under the existing contracts. So the Big Ten champion would play in the Rose Bowl no matter what. The SEC champion is going to play in the Sugar Bowl no matter what. The ACC champion is going to be played. There's not a tie-in, but the ACC champion obviously is going to be a lot closer to Atlanta. So they're going to play in the Peach Bowl in New Year's Day, and the Big 12 champion is going to be much closer to the Fiesta Bowl. So, and I guess this is technically, with as stupid as these conferences are, I guess technically you could have, like, if SMU won I don't know who the easternmost team in the Big 12 is, West Virginia? I guess technically, yeah, if West Virginia won the Big 12 and SMU won the ACC, theoretically this could be flipped, but generally pretty much all the Big 12 teams are out west, so they're going to go to the Fiesta Bowl, and the ACC teams are going to go to the Peach Bowl. And then in the semifinals, it is determined, it's the Orange Bowl and it's the so Atlanta is in the quarterfinals. That's determined by bowl contracts. The national championship is Atlanta. That's set no matter what. The only thing that's a little bit of a wiggle room is the semifinals. Those are going to be in either the Cotton Bowl or the Orange Bowl, and those are going to be determined by proximity to campus. So the example they gave last week during the sort of like sample call, or the for the media where they sort of walked everyone through things, was that they used last year's ranking. So Michigan, they used the final rankings from last year. So Michigan's the number 1 ranking. And Michigan is slightly closer to Dallas than they are to Miami. So therefore, Michigan would go to the Cotton Bowl, and then the other team would, the number 2 team would go, their side of the bracket would feed into the Orange Bowl. That was the example they used. So Oregon is closer to Dallas. So Oregon would feed into the Cotton Bowl if Oregon is the number 1 seed. It's not, they made it sound like this is another one of these examples where they sort of talk out of both sides of their mouth. They said it would just be determined by that. And then they were asked, well, is there any wiggle room? And they said, well, I mean, maybe. And so it was one of those clear as mud situations where it's probably going to be this unless it's that. But either way, Atlanta is not a destination that is going to be one that is a wiggle room destination. That's going to be Cotton Bowl in Arlington, Texas versus Orange Bowl in suburban Miami.
Yeah, and they said, just to kind of repeat some things we said, they're not going to make adjustments to try and get away from rematches that we've already seen, and they're not going to try and sit there and parse out, well, this is 100 miles closer or whatever. It's kind of feed to where it's going to kind of feed.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Let me see if we had any more from Tony. Did we do this one about the... Yeah, we already did that one.
Yeah, we already did that one. Yep.
But we're getting a lot of good questions from people. Just we got so much going on. Things are moving so quickly that we're going to miss some questions right there.
Well, here's one from Steve. Does the Big Ten get 4 in right now? Yes. And really, I think unless something stupid happens, Oregon's in, Ohio State's in. I mean, it would take something really stupid for one of those teams to miss out. So those 2 are in. Penn State, if Penn State wins out, and they have winnable games left, they should win out. If they win out, they're in. Indiana is the only one that I could see potentially getting left out. And if Indiana beats Michigan this week, that's not a great win. They're probably not going. They're probably going to finish the regular season with 0 ranked wins, just to get that on the table. But if they're 11-1 and they lose to Ohio State, and they don't lose to Ohio State 49-0. If they lose to Ohio State 31-20, 31-24, 35-24, anything in a score or 2 kind of range, I think they're probably in. If they lose by 4 touchdowns to Ohio State, sure. I think then you're going to have a conversation about 0 quality wins and you had a blowout and your only chance to play a good team, then you're maybe having that conversation. Short of that, I think the Big Ten's probably getting 4 teams in, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say I don't. I'm trying to think of who the 5th team is. Who could benefit if somebody stumbles, and I don't think anybody's close enough in that 5th spot. So
No.
this is a case of either 4 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
It would take Indiana dropping 2 games and like that other game. I mean, if you lose to Ohio State by 50, that's not necessarily going to help your cause. But if you also if they lose to Purdue in the bucket game, that would be a killer at that point. But I think if things go kind of chalky, it's going to be 4.
Well, and the other side of this is the other way you could have that is if you lose to Ohio State and it's somewhat close as Indiana, but then SMU beats Miami in the ACC championship game. All of a sudden, the ACC has 2 teams. That means instead of 4 Big Ten, 4 SEC, someone's losing a spot because then the ACC gets 2 teams in instead of 1. Right now, it's 4 SEC, 4 Big Ten, and then 1 each from the Big 12, ACC, Mountain West, and Independence, being Notre Dame. If you have a bid stealer, you see this in March all the time, that a team that is the 6th seed in some small conference wins the tournament, and then the number 1 seed is going to get an at-large, then that's one other at-large team that's not getting in. So that's something that could impact this as well. And if you're Indiana and you're 11-1 and you don't have any good wins and you lose to Ohio State, you are in danger of having that bid stolen. But if if it is chalk and Indiana loses to Ohio State but loses close, I think they're probably in.
Yeah, I agree. Tony added to this: the committee acknowledged Ohio State's rebuilt offensive line and their performance against Penn State and being a factor in having them over Georgia as well. All you have to do is go back and look at the final 550 or something of the game where Ohio State started on the 1-foot line and just ran it right down Penn State's throat. And this was obviously with the rebuilt line, kicking Donovan Jackson out to tackle, bringing in Carson Hinsman. I think Ohio State showed that they can be nimble, that they can make some adjustments if need be due to injuries, because that everybody's going to deal with injuries at some point of the season. And Georgia just does what Georgia does, and it wins games, but it's not necessarily been super impressive so far this season. And we're going to learn a lot more. I mean, Ohio State has a rivalry game at the end of the season. It has a game against the number 8, according to the playoff rankings, team in Indiana. We're going to learn there. And, I don't have Georgia's schedule in front of me at the moment, but, they're going to have some other meat on the bone.
For sure. Here's more from the committee. And they have been very consistent top 5 defense. They had changes in the offensive line and still performed. So for us, it was a consistency. Did we do that one already?
Yeah, we did. A lot of them sound kind of similar because the chairman of the committee is zapped in the brain to make sure that he only says things in very narrow lanes. So, I don't think we're going to necessarily get a lot of stuff. I do like this that Tony did say. There's a question about Pitt right now. I'm going to check out mentally for a bit. There have been times, and I haven't been on the call in a couple of years because Tony handles this for us, and Tom and I, we filibuster until Tony gets back because he's the star of the show. I think he's laughing right now, but there have been times that reporters get indignant with whoever the committee chairman is. It's like, aren't you aware of this, and this? Or, why isn't Coastal Carolina getting more love? Why isn't Liberty getting more love?
SMU 48, Pitt 25 final. That is the most recent impression that the committee has had of the Pittsburgh Panthers. That probably has something to do with it, along with the fact that Pitt's best win this season is scrolling. They have no ranked wins. They have no borderline ranked wins, really. Best win is probably Syracuse. They beat them 41-13.
Syracuse has looked good some weeks and other weeks.
Yeah, the extent of their record is Kent State, at Cincinnati, home for Virginia, home for Youngstown State, at North Carolina, home for Cal, home for Syracuse, at SMU, and they got firebombed by SMU. So, and moving forward, they have Virginia, and then they have Clemson, and those are both home, and then they're at Louisville. So if they win those next 2 games, if they win out and then you win the ACC, sure. If you win out and you lose the ACC close, you're going to miss, but you're going to miss close-ish. But, Pitt at 18, I'm honestly thinking that's a
little higher than I would have expected them, honestly.
Yep.
But
Bootzilla says Georgia's at Ole Miss and Tennessee next 2 weeks. Well, let me tell you, if Georgia wins out with those 2 wins, that's the number 7 team in the rankings and the number 16 team in the rankings. Buckeyes have only the number 8 team in terms of ranked opponents remaining. So if each team wins out with sort of similar results, everyone wins every game by 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns or whatever, Georgia's going to go into championship weekend ahead of Ohio State. I can say that with pretty high degree of certainty. And then we'll see what the conference championship game, if Ohio State beats Oregon in the conference championship game, then they might vault back ahead of Georgia because they beat the number 1 team in the country. And if they don't, well, then it's probably a moot point.
The difference between 2 and 3 means nothing to Ohio State as long as number 1 is in their conference.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
It's nice for promos. We're going to see Ohio State, for some reason, playing Purdue on Big Noon Saturday. And we're going to see a number 2 next to Ohio State's name, and everybody's going to be like, that's right, damn right, excited about that. But it doesn't really mean anything. So, it is what it is.
Yep. Real Beep JM says, do you foresee a time when college football goes to a pro-style setup with playoffs and regular season formatting with divisions? I think a lot of that made it hinge on what happens during the next gap in the TV contracts. Because the TV contracts, we had for years been assuming that the ACC deal was going to go through 2035 or 2036, whenever the stated time was that it was going to go through. Now it's sort of come out that, but there's also this potential window in 2026 or so that ESPN could opt out of the deal, and then that would open things up quite a bit for Clemson, Florida State, and everyone else. If that happens, then everything is probably on the table, because then that's when you could potentially have two super conferences and really splitting off from the rest of the sport. But Tony is back now. Tony, we appreciated all of your little telegrams from the future. Boy, it feels like the committee is already in midseason form in terms of its vagueness and use of different terms. Well,
the last question was about Alabama being the highest ranked 2-loss team. And Ward Manuel said, well, they win over Georgia, and hey, they've got a win over number 22 Missouri and losses to 2 ranked opponents. So they're top 20 in scoring. Their defense is always solid, even though they don't look back at past years. So unless it's like Alabama's defense, I guess. So that is one note from the committee, where you're always looking for some sort of a vague answer, or not just a vague answer, but a structured answer based on the rankings, putting the rankings in a way that they can now put teams where they want into that top 12 area.
Tony, I want to hear all about Pitt. What did the committee say about Pitt?
They're not it.
No, it was like, basically it was like, well, they lost to number 13 SMU. Like, what do you want from us? That was about the gist of it. My ears started bleeding and my eye actually ruptured, so I had to turn away from that one. The Notre Dame thing that I posted in the chat, they mentioned the win over Texas A&M, and I'm not exactly sure where they are because the font is too small on my screen right now, but they had to win over 14, win over number 22 or so Louisville. So as I said, we felt they overcame what was a troubling loss to Northern Illinois, and they say troubling because that was not the Notre Dame team we've seen this year. So they've gotten back to being the Irish that everybody expected. Boise State is, quote, just an impressive team. Committee is very high on them. They have a win over Washington State. They got the win over UNLV, which they also like. So you see that with the ranking there with Boise State. They're pretty well locked in, but they can't afford to lose. I'm not sure if I posted in the chat about Penn State versus Tennessee. They liked Penn State's wins over Illinois and USC in overtime. The loss to Ohio State was back and forth. Could have gone either way. They cited Tyler Warren as one of the reasons they liked Penn State more than Tennessee, which certainly has to irk, or not that he cares, but Josh Heupel to be losing points on offensive points in the committee to Penn State is not something I ever thought we'd hear about Tennessee football.
Don't lose to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Here's one from our guy James Krupia, who covers the Oregon Ducks. He asked, and if this is in a court of law, there's probably would have been an objection to it. But the comment, the statement was, given what the committee did to Florida State last year, do you think there is a disincentivizing of teams to make their injuries entirely known? Do you think it disincentivizes them from saying somebody's out for the season? Why would anybody now announce that, knowing that you could knock them out of the playoffs for it? And the answer from Ward Manuel, and it was basically Florida State had every opportunity to, in general, teams have an opportunity to make the playoffs with the team that they have at that time. So whether or not people are going to hide injuries, the fact that players aren't playing is going to be noticed by everybody. And whether or not, like with Tez Johnson, we're talking about, some say it's a season-ending injury, some say it's not. If Dan Lanning doesn't want to put that out there, if he's not playing and Oregon is playing poorly, they're going to take that into account. Like this is the team we're seeing. This may be the team we continue to see. So they're not. They don't think coaches are going to hide season-ending injuries from them, but they are wrong.
We can't put like hologram Tez Johnson out there or hologram Biggie or something like that.
There's no incentive for announcing a season-ending injury other than it's your conference's rules. Coaches aren't going to want to put anything out there for the committee that they don't have to. But the thing is, and I think, Tom, you and I disagree with this. The committee saw enough of Florida State last year to realize we don't want them anywhere near this playoff, because Jordan Travis was the main reason. They were one of the main reasons. And then once you remove him from the situation, they were a completely different team. And they got judged on the team that they became, not the team that they were. And that's what the committee says they will always do. They're going to judge based on how things are. Because remember, it's a blank sheet of paper every single week.
Yeah, it's a blank sheet of paper every single week. I still have an issue with that. I really didn't like that last year, because if you're judging Ohio State this year based on, well, they're a different team without Josh Simmons. How did they look the week after the Oregon game against a very middling Nebraska team? They looked terrible. Like, you can figure it out sometimes. I don't think you're necessarily doomed forever based on one injury. It's just, it is something where you are going to feel like there has never been a bigger screw job in the history of organized sports than when it happens to your team. And I can kind of sympathize with that. If that's the stated philosophy and the stated rule, then that's the stated rule, and that's fine. And if, I don't know, Jalen Milroe gets hurt, then will Alabama get left out of the playoff? Probably not. I think that feels like a rule that's going to get applied, sort of selectively, but I don't really care for it either way. But if that's the rule, then that's the rule.
I'll just let you guys know. Will Howard just hit Carnell Tate in the end zone in the Fiesta Bowl against BYU to put Ohio State up 37-6 in the third quarter, extra point pending. So that 5 seed paying off.
Yeah. This is Bootzilla. Speaking of college football playoff conspiracy theories, what do we always say, Tony? When you want to know what they want to do at the top, look at what they want to do at the bottom. If they're justifying Alabama being there because they have a win over a ranked Missouri team, a ranked Missouri team based on what? And the answer is, well,
beating Vandy.
Well, yeah. Well, hey, they got a ranked win over Vanderbilt, 30-27. You know, they did at the time. Boston College was ranked when they beat them. They shut out Murray State. So I don't know.
I mean,
you know,
nobody puts the racers in a corner.
but they've been blown out by the two best teams they've played in Texas A&M and Alabama. They weren't close. Lost by more than 4 touchdowns in both of those games. And they have not looked anything like they did last year. They have not lived up to expectations this year, and the committee is basically doing them a favor by keeping them in this, but they have no shot moving forward. They're not going to be involved in the playoffs in any way, and I don't even think they can be a spoiler at this point in anything. They don't play anybody the rest of the way out. They've got Oklahoma, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and Arkansas. They can end up 9-3 or 10-2 and be, I'm saying they could end up at 10-2 and not be in the hunt for the playoffs because they have no real wins and they shouldn't be jumping. There are going to be some worthy 10-2 teams. I don't think Missouri would be one of them if they went out.
It's going to be Missouri. It's going to be South Carolina. You're going to have to deal with one of them. So, I mean, that's just what's going to happen. It's going to come flying up at the end of the season.
Well, at least, South Carolina has 3 losses, so it's going to be tougher, but at least they have, a blowout win over Texas A&M and a close loss to LSU, but they also will have Clemson coming up. So hopefully South Carolina will just win at Missouri and they can just jump off the cliff together and no longer be part of the picture. But there's so much of this, the down the field things, the Clemson or the Missouri, and it's just there for the teams above them. I'm interested to see what Colorado can do, and can they continue? They have to win out obviously and win the Big 12. And can their offense just pose a problem for somebody in one of those matchups? I think so, but also, what can their defense do? Not much.
Right.
So, have you guys been talking to people? Is that what you guys have been doing?
Yeah, we've
gone through a lot of questions,
yeah.
And had a good conversation going. Let me see if Jeff Frazier is asking if they've asked if the Indiana game time has been announced. No, it's not as of yet.
Well, and I don't know if you guys saw my post on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus of what that game time might be. Army and Notre Dame is a 7:30 on NBC that week. So I can't remember, Tom. Do you remember if CBS and NBC agreed at times, and Kevin, please chime in, that when NBC has a 7:30 that maybe CBS would or NBC would then have a 3:30 Big Ten, and then CBS maybe goes to 7:30?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I don't know that that's an absolute locked-in thing, but I believe that, it would make sense to not go head-to-head with other Big Ten games because you're looking at Big Ten audience. The whole point of Big Noon Kickoff for Fox was, well, no one else is putting a good game here, so we're going to put a good game here, and then that's been a huge ratings bonanza. If you have a Big Ten game that you're potentially putting up against another Big Ten game, fans in Big Ten country would probably want to watch both of those games if they're 2 good games. And by putting up against each other, you can't do that. So it would make sense to split them up. We don't know the answer yet on the Indiana game, which is kind of annoying, but we'll find that out on, what is it, next Monday, right? Next Monday, we'll find out that game. We found out the Northwestern game this Monday. The next Monday, it could be really any of the networks. I don't think anything's been announced for that week yet. And we don't know. The thing that makes it difficult is we don't know who has the first pick in terms of networks that week.
Right.
So
my thought process on that was it's a really bad week for Fox partners. So this was probably one of the last weeks drafted in which Fox is like probably not, it may have been the last week drafted. And I don't think Fox would need the last pick of the first pick of the last week. So I would think that would be CBS or NBC, which would hopefully eliminate the 3:30 for the fan or the noon game for the fans. The thing I just don't know is whether it's a CBS 3:30 or would CBS kick it to 7:30 or would NBC take it at 3:30. My guess is that it doesn't end up on Fox, but that is strictly a guess based on a guess of where this week was drafted and the fact that Fox would look at this week and be like, yeah, we don't need that one. The poorest can have that one. NBC and CBS can have that one. We've got better stuff coming. Because if you look at the week, it's not a very good week for the Big 12 or the Big 10 other than that game. And there would have been no reason to think that this would have been something that Fox wanted back in May.
You need to have a good lead into Kathy Bates and Matlock.
Hey, she's legit. Just a small town lawyer.
Small town pizza lawyer. Lettuce and tomato. I'm worried about that Indiana game. I'm not going to lie, because Indiana isn't going to lose to Michigan and Ohio State back-to-back this year.
Well, that's true.
I think you could think that Ohio State's going to win that game and also have that be extremely true, because I don't think they're going to lose to Michigan this week.
No, I don't. And that's a 3:30 game.
Sorry, 2 weeks. Yeah.
No, it's this week.
Is it this week?
Yeah. So
Okay.
3:30. So I believe while we're doing the post game, that game will be going on, and we'll probably I believe it's this week, and we'll be getting constant updates, I'm sure, in the chat on all of the hijinks going on in Bloomington. Because people do love to let us know when Michigan is struggling.
We do get play-by-play in the post-game show, which we do appreciate. We're not being sarcastic or anything. We do appreciate it because Tom and Tony are talking, and I'm generally arguing with trolls in the chat. So
we are completely out of touch.
Yes.
Yeah.
These mainstream media college football trolls, way out of touch with the average viewer and the average college football game.
And then when we see scores, we start going, "Oh, did you see this? Did you see this?" And the people like in the chat are like, "Yeah, we've been watching it for a half an hour right now."
TV right there. Yeah.
Did you hear this? Have you seen this? Yes, we have.
Folks, have you heard about? Yes.
How long do you guys want to go? It seems like we've covered everything.
We hit a lot of the high points right now. This is the first week. I think that next week we'll have the benefit of going from seeing how week one changes to week two. Maybe we can get some ideas of what the committee is thinking and some things there. But I think we've litigated the hell out of everything.
Yeah, we're at an hour 42 already, and so yeah, that feels like we have really explored the studio space, and we'll have plenty more. There's plenty more to talk about this weekend. Is the Buckeyes taking on Purdue, Michigan taking on Indiana, and all sorts of other fun stuff all over college football.
LSU and Alabama. I believe that is in Baton Rouge. Is that correct? Alabama at LSU this weekend. 7:30 kick. Should possibly get home in time for that. Somebody will be eliminated from the playoffs in that one, which is great fun for everybody. So if you want to hit the thumbs up, if you have not yet, I'm sure we've been asking you all day long to do that. So one last time wouldn't hurt. So please do that and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so. We would appreciate that. And of course, hit the bell to be notified when we're going live like this, dropping videos like we do all the time. And of course, you can always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. A fantastic time to become a premium member, just $4.99 for the first month. It'll get you the Michigan game and more, and there's going to be a ton of coverage there. And, of course, Indiana week as well, as you all know. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.